They were the Sultan's most feared warriors, an elite force, forged from the unlikeliest of origins, taken as young boys, trained to perfection, bound by unwavering loyalty. For centuries, the Janissaries stood at the forefront of military conquests. Their blades carved the borders of an empire. From the 14th to the early 19th century, they secured victories that shaped history. But with power came danger, and with rise came the inevitable fall. Before the Janissaries, the Turks had already established themselves as warriors of legend. Their battle traditions, honed over centuries, made them a formidable force across Asia and Europe. Even the Islamic Middle East looked to the Turkic sultanates, like the Seljuks, for protection. They were hardened by the steppes, shaped by conflict, and guided by an unbreakable code of war. Discipline, speed, strategy. They were the perfect mold for what would soon become the Janissary Corps. The legendary battle prowess of the Ottomans was evident long before the Janissaries took center stage. 1389, the Battle of Kosovo. The Ottoman army, still evolving into the structured force it would become, stood against a Serbian-led coalition. They were outnumbered, but they were not outmatched. Rather than exhausting themselves in prolonged sword fights, the Ottoman warriors executed an extraordinary tactic. They wrapped their left arms in cloth and oiled thick leather, transforming them into living shields. Serbian swords clashed against them, only to slide away, harmless. And then the counterstrike, precise, lethal, straight to the nose and respiratory points, instant death. The enemy ranks collapsed. Chaos spread through their lines. The Ottomans had prevailed. At the dawn of the 15th century, the Ottoman Empire faced its most dangerous adversary yet, Tamerlane and his fearsome Mongol Turkic army. 1402, the Battle of Ankara. Two expanding empires, two unstoppable forces. A brutal clash was inevitable. The Ottoman warriors fought with valor, but the Mongol cavalry was unlike anything they had faced before. Their speed, their precision, their sheer maneuverability. Ottoman formations collapsed under the storm of hooves and steel. And then, disaster. Sultan Bayezid was captured. The loss at Ankara was a painful setback, a humbling blow, but it did not break the Ottomans. Instead, it hardened them. It forced them to adapt, to evolve, to refine their strategies. And from this defeat emerged a new doctrine, one that would later be perfected by the Janissaries. Young Christian boys were taken from their families, brought to the empire's heart, and forged into warriors. But not all were taken unwillingly. To many, this was a chance, an opportunity for a better life. Just as ambitious families today send their children to the world's finest universities, parents of the Balkans willingly gave up their sons, hoping they would rise among the ranks of the most powerful empire on earth. To serve in Istanbul, the jewel of civilization, was to grasp destiny itself. Upon arrival, their pasts were erased, their names, their faiths, their very identities replaced. They were reborn, moulded under strict discipline, trained in war, philosophy, and administration. Some became warriors, others scholars, and a select few leaders, men like Sokolu Mehmed Pasha, whose name echoes in history, rivaling even the greatest of sultans. Köprülü Mehmed Pasha, Ibrahim Pasha, names that did not inherit power, but earned it. The walls of Constantinople stood firm for over 1,000 years, a city thought to be untouchable, impenetrable, a gateway between two worlds, and yet it fell. 1453. The mighty walls shook under the relentless barrage of Ottoman cannons. The defenders fought desperately. But then came the moment that changed history. Among the Ottoman ranks, one warrior stood apart, Ulubatlı Hasan. He saw the city's fate in his grasp, and he climbed. Under a hail of arrows, he scaled the great walls, with nothing but a sword and a shield, wounded, bleeding, yet unstoppable. Arrows pierced his armor, swords slashed at him, but with his final breath, he planted the Ottoman flag atop the walls of Constantinople. The sight shattered the defenders' morale. The city, thought to be eternal, had fallen. Byzantium was no more. The Ottoman Empire had entered a new era. The Kingdom of Hungary, a formidable power standing in the way of Ottoman expansion into Europe, a kingdom defended by knights in shining armor, heavy cavalry, war-hardened soldiers, a force not easily broken. But on August 29th, 1526, the fields of Mohacs became a graveyard. The Ottoman army, led by Suleiman the Magnificent, faced off against King Louis II's forces, and what followed was annihilation. The Janissaries, with their disciplined formations and deadly musket fire, broke the Hungarian ranks in mere hours. The elite Ottoman cavalry encircled the enemy, striking from all sides. The riverbanks ran red with blood. By the battle's end, the Hungarian king lay dead, his kingdom shattered. Mohacs was not just a victory, it was a warning to Europe. The Ottomans were unstoppable. To the east, a rival empire threatened Ottoman rule. The Safavids of Persia, led by Shah Ismail I, sought to expand their influence. They relied on their fierce cavalry, swift, deadly, and fearless. The Ottomans, however, had something the Safavids did not: firepower. 1514, the plains of Chaldiran, the Ottoman army, under Sultan Selim I, arranged itself in a defensive line. The Janissaries took position behind wagons, forming an unbreakable gunpowder wall. Muskets, cannons, precision and discipline, the Safavid cavalry charged, only to meet a storm of lead and fire. One by one, they fell. The battlefield was littered with shattered armor and broken lances. It was a lesson in modern warfare. The age of swords and cavalry alone was over. The age of gunpowder had begun. The year was 1566. The Ottomans, at the height of their power, marched towards Szigetvar, a Hungarian fortress standing in defiance of their rule. The great Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, now in his 70s, led what would be his final campaign. The fortress, commanded by Nicholas Shubich-Zrinski, stood firm. The defenders fought with unrelenting fury, but the Janissaries, the empire's finest warriors, would not be denied. For a month, they battered the walls. For a month, they stormed the gates. And on September 8th, as the fortress lay in ruins, the defenders made their final charge. One last defiant stand against the empire that would not be stopped. But Szigetvar was more than a battle. It was a turning point, for on that very night, in his imperial tent, Suleiman, the Magnificent, died. The Sultan, who had brought the empire to its golden age, would not see its final victory. The Ottomans took Szigetvar, but they lost their greatest ruler, and so, even in victory, the empire stood on the edge of change. For centuries, the Janissaries stood at the forefront of the Ottoman Empire's most decisive battles. They were the Sultan's Iron Heart, an elite force unmatched in discipline and prowess. From the legendary Battle of Kosovo to the conquest of Constantinople, the Janissaries helped forge an empire that stretched across continents, unstoppable and legendary. But as history has shown, every rise casts a shadow. Power, unchecked, breeds its own destruction. After their zenith, the Janissaries, once the empire's most feared warriors, began to change. What happens when the warriors who secured the empire's future become a threat to its stability? In the next part of our story, we will reveal how the Janissaries, once the pride of the empire, began to unravel. From their rising influence to their eventual downfall, this is a tale of power, corruption, and the fragile balance between loyalty and rebellion. The rise of the Janissaries is only half the story. Stay tuned as we dive deep into the decline of these once indomitable warriors, a turning point that reshapes the very empire they helped build. What follows will shock you. The end of the Janissaries marks not just the fall of an elite force, but the beginning of a new chapter in Ottoman history. Their fall will come, but what happens next?